courtroom. The jury is in its 5th hour of deliberating in the case against a former biker gang president accused of directing criminal street gang activity that ended with the murder of a rival gang member.
If convicted, 58-year-old Kevin Higgins could get life in prison. And as KLTV7's Lauren Tier tells us, today his attorney was held in contempt of court.
Mr. Platten, this court is going to find that you were in contempt. Mr. Platten, this court is going to find that you were in contempt. This case will be sent over to the presiding judge for appointment of a neutral magistrate to review that contempt proceeding. I suggest you say nothing else.
Before the jury was brought in to start day 4 of Kevin Higgins' trial, Judge Austin Reeve Jackson raised his voice in warning to defense attorney Eric Platten, who was speaking to witnesses in the hallway outside the courtroom. Once the commotion settled, the defense called retired Ugly Man Cossack member Tiger Golden to testify.
You were aware of the club business across the state as the National Secretary? Yes. Were you aware of violence by your club against the 1% Cossacks?
No.
Golden served as the national secretary at the same time Higgins was national president. Responsible for taking the minutes at national meetings and keeping track of membership, Golden testified Higgins did not order the smash on site against the rival 1%er Cossacks. This being the order that led to the 2020 murder of 1%er member Brandon Edwards. Golden also testified in defense of Higgins' character.
Love that? Yes. Want that first group? Yes. Was the murder of anyone? No.
In closing arguments, the state said the violence against the 1%ers would not have happened without Higgins in control.
He is the escalation. He is the club.
The defense held the stance that there was no criminal activity until Chad Kroll joined the club and climbed the ranks to become National Sergeant-at-Arms, ultimately giving the smash on-site orders to his trusted Regional Sergeant-at-Arms.
All I've shown is that they had a rabid dog. Took advantage. A lot of young guys.
Lauren Tier, KLTV 7 News.
Co-defendant Chad Crowell's trial is scheduled to start January 13th.